Good morning, good morning. Am I making noise here for us? Good. Yeah, I got a purple shirt and a purple tie for hair for. No, I'm not up there today. I'm just. Yeah, but this is first Sunday of Advent, and need to get in the spirit for us all. So anyway, I need to get. Well, I try to look nice for when it's important. I don't know, did I tell you the story about one of the fellas in one of my classes in college said to me, "Tankersley, you're undoubtedly the worst dressed guy on campus." I'd wear my Levi's and my jean jacket and sometimes a t-shirt and go to class. Then I told him that if I dress up to go to class all the time, huge lecture classes, professor doesn't even know who's there and who you are. But if I have a date with my girlfriend and if I'm dressed up like I go to class, she's not going to think she's special. So I save my dressing up for when it matters. That was my thought. I don't think so.
You carried on.
Yeah, I carried on, but it was right. But it's a question of different values. Maybe I would have gotten a shade or two better grade if I'd looked pretty for the professor, but no, I don't think so either. But anyway, I think we'll unless somebody really wants the answer to some particular social principle issue, we'll move on and get back to Genesis. But there are some issues that always crop up and come out. Now we begin at the 34th chapter, and all of a sudden, someone that we hardly heard about and didn't even know she existed in some of the list, we get to Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, and says that she went out to visit the women of the region. Now the region there is that after Jacob meets Esau and they have their reconciliation and reunion, and then Jacob goes down into the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, on his way from Paddan Aram, and he camped before the city, and from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, he bought for 100 pieces of money the plot of land on which he had pitched his tent, and there he erected an altar and called it Elohe Israel. So he settled in this area of a city called Shechem. But then this story is slipped in here. Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the women of the region. Now we're going to assume that it is the region of Shechem. However, when Shechem, son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the region, saw her, he seized her and lay with her by force, and his soul was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob. He loved the girl and spoke tenderly to her. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this girl to be my wife." Now Jacob heard that Shechem had defiled his daughter Dinah, but his sons were with the cattle in the field, so Jacob held his peace until they came. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him, just as the sons of Jacob came in from the field. And when they heard of it, the men were indignant and very angry, because he had committed an outrage in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing ought not to be done. But Hamor spoke with them, saying, "The heart of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him in marriage. Make marriages with us." Now here it shifts from just one family and a boy and a girl, and can they be married? and he jumps into a huge thing with combining the two tribes or groups of people. But Hamor spoke with him, saying, "The heart of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him in marriage. Then make marriages with us. Give your daughters to us, and take our daughters for yourselves. You shall live with us, and the land shall be open to you. Live and trade in it, and get property in it." Shechem also said to her father and to her brothers, now Shechem jumps in and speaks, "Let me find favor with you, and whatever you say to me I will give. Put the marriage present and gift as high as you like, and I will give whatever you ask me. Only give me the girl to be my wife." Now the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and his father Hamor deceitfully. That's an important word out there to warn us about things that are about to happen. Deceitfully, because he had defiled their sister Dinah. And they said to them, "We cannot do this thing to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a disgrace to us. Only on this condition will we consent to you, that you will become as we are, and every male among you circumcised. Then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters for ourselves." So it kind of combines and weaves together this situation of one man and one woman to be married into a whole union of these two groups of people to become one. "And we will live among you and become one people. But if you will not listen to us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and be gone." Now, that's kind of a mix-up there, because they're talking about their sister, and all of a sudden it's our daughter, and be gone. Now their words pleased Hamor and Hamor's son Shechem, and the young man did not delay to do the thing, because he was delighted with Jacob's daughter. So Shechem immediately gets himself circumcised in that sentence, but the story goes on. Now he was the most honored of all his family. So Hamor and his son Shechem came to the gate of the city and spoke to the men of their city, saying, "These people are friendly with us. Let them live in the land and trade in it, for the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters in marriage, and let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will they agree to live among us, to become one people, that every male among us must be circumcised as they are circumcised. Will not," and then here's the argument, "will not their livestock, their property, and all their animals be ours? Only let us agree with them, and they will live among us." And all who went out of the city gate heeded Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male was circumcised, all who went out of the gate of his city. So this part, and obviously we've got two versions of the story being woven together here, but at that one line in 19, Shechem immediately is circumcised, but then this other story, it doesn't happen until after they talk to all of the men of the city and get everybody to agree, and then everybody does this at once. Then on the third day, when they were still in pain, two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and came against the city unawares and killed all of the males. They killed Hamor and his son Shechem with the sword, and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went away. And the other sons of Jacob came upon. Now here we've got two full brothers of Dinah, Simeon and Levi. They go do this deed and kill all the men. And then all of a sudden, and the other sons of Jacob came upon the slain, plundered the city, because their sister had been defiled, and they took their flocks and their herds, their donkeys, and whatever else was in the city and in the field, all their wealth, all their little ones, and their wives, all that was in the houses, they captured and made their prey. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have brought trouble on me by making me odious to the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. My numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household. Which kind of means you sons as well. You foolish boys, what were you thinking? But they said, should our sister be treated like a whore? End of chapter 34. So, this is called the rape of Dinah. Y'all completely understand that and you're ready to move on to chapter 35? Now, that's kind of confusing. There are a lot of things there that we'll kind of unpack. First of all, Von Rad begins this analysis to say that this story about Dinah is a compilation of different versions, and I kind of pointed out a couple of those places where it seems to indicate that as I was reading through. And that most notable place is where Simeon and Levi alone take revenge for the defilement of Dinah, their full sister. And then all of a sudden, all the others are talked about joining in and plundering the city and so forth. But that really seems to be, one version had all of them killing all the males and plundering. But the Levi and Simeon only just went in and murdered for revenge. They didn't have any material gain to plunder the city, but simply to take revenge to sort of win back their sister's honor that was taken from her. But there's another problem. He says that some of the traditions don't seem to know of Dinah at all, and so this story is kind of a surprise inserted into when they combine the traditions that, oh my gosh, he's got a sister, and oh my gosh, did this happen? So anyway, that's one thing. Another problem arises if one calculates the timeline of the Jacob saga. Now we know that he was living under the control and rule of Laban, and he was having all these children with Leah and Rachel, but they're not through having babies when he leaves. Joseph has just been born, but Benjamin has not yet been born. So Joseph's just a little baby when he leaves to go meet Esau and then have this reunion, and then they go and settle. So unless we are to assume that they were hanging out for 10 or 15 years before this happens, then these children, Dinah and Levi and Simeon, would have been too young for all of this to be happening. So it's not enough years to have passed yet, and obviously Dinah wouldn't have been able to have grown up into this beautiful young woman. But the point of which means that this story had an origin outside of the Jacob saga, and so it just is kind of laid onto that story and doesn't try to completely harmonize it. But anyway, her name is omitted in some of the lists of the children of Jacob. But anyway, as we know from many other parts of Genesis, these isolated tales, when they're woven into the main narrative, they had their own meaning and purpose originally, but then the redactor has a different purpose for using the story and adapts it for the redactor's purpose of its place in the longer narrative. Von Rad explains that, to give us kind of a little background, the cultural setting here at this time of the history of the patriarchs, and that is they were nomadic shepherds and farmers, or nomadic shepherds and herders, and they had been moving around. You know, we've got Jacob leaves Laban and takes all of his flocks, and then he meets Esau, who, you know, he offers different flocks, but Esau is also kind of a nomadic, roaming around within the area as well. And the nomadic tribes and herds would try to settle close to urban areas to where they could engage in trade, sell the meat and sell the wool and sell the milk and aspects of the products of their herding, and then to get things from the city dwellers, which may be they may be working with metal and get some knives and tools and so forth in this trade. But anyway, this cultural dynamic has a situation where these younger people in the town and in the nomadic tribes, what happens when people go on vacation and take their teenagers and to some place where there's other teenagers. Those teenagers don't hang out with the family. They see other teenagers and they, somehow they connect and they want to run around together and talk to each other and all of that and have these fall in and out of love and all that kind of stuff. But the young marriable aged men and women do become interested in one another, and so this combining of the two groups of people in the same geographical region creates the opportunity for a Romeo and Juliet kinds of situations of two families that don't accept each other, but the two young people fall in love. But it's also very likely that a young female like Dinah, living in a very limited and maybe boring existence with her people, would find that the activity of the city looked kind of thrilling and interesting, but not really being a wild and reckless girl, she did explore and want to explore the novelty of the city, but not to go hang out with the boys, but to go visit the women. So she went to visit the women. Now, before any other events can be described, we hear that Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, and prince of the land, meaning the son of the chief or king of the area, saw Dinah, seized her, and some translations would say, lay with her and humbled her. But other translations make it briefer and more to the point of the obvious interpretation. Shechem saw her, seized her, and raped her, or took her by force. Anyway, but the biblical text and wording does not boldly state what seems to be obvious. It is more euphemistic, using words that imply but do not specifically and boldly state. But instead of rape, it says, he lay with her and humbled her. Now, Von Rad explains that the word Inna, or Inna, I-N-N, long A, Inna, meaning humbled her, carries the connotation of moral and social degrading and debasing, by which a girl loses the expectancy of a fully valid marriage. Now, Von Rad is using the euphemisms as well in that long explanation. In common jargon, she loses her virginity, which means she is damaged goods in the economy of the patriarchal marriage customs of securing a very lucrative bride price, those gifts of valuables and commodities that the groom's family provides in order to have the right to marry the young woman. Now, given that she's damaged goods, it could mean then that there will be no marriage for her. She could be kept in the home on the level of a slave or a servant girl. She has no value to be married off. And so they just keep her in the family, but on a much even lower level of value and recognition. The other option is she could be kicked out of the home. You have disgraced yourself, you have disgraced the family, and then her only option is prostitution to survive in a culture like was existing then. Now, but anyway, there is a possibility of whether it was a rape or consensual sex. It doesn't really get into that, but it gives the impression that maybe, from some people's analyses, she was looking for love in all the wrong places. But anyway, we'll get to more of that in a minute. Now, along with this theme of her being damaged goods, and it seems to fit, immediately Shechem's soul was drawn to Dinah, and he loved her and spoke tenderly to her. That's the very next sentence. And then he asked her father, Hamor, get me this maiden for my wife. And just like in our movies and crime scene stories on TV, the scene is right there with Shechem and Hamor and Dinah, and now the scene shifts to back at the ranch with Jacob. And we have Jacob, having heard that Shechem has defiled his daughter Dinah, and the word here is defiled, not raped, but defiled, as today's legal cases distinguish between consensual sex and forced sex, then it's called rape. And if Dinah is indeed a minor, if we look at the age issue, it would be statutory rape regardless of consent or not consent. But Jacob hears and he holds his peace. Now we remember Abraham, when Lot is captured, he gathers up his small army and he goes off to rescue him immediately. But then Jacob here keeps his peace. Now we can't be sure whether the fact that all of his sons are out in the fields tending to the flocks is why he held his peace, or if he had other concerns that may come up a little later. But he had no power, and this is the point Von Rond points out, and the other scholars, had no power all by himself, because he's a minority group, moved into the area of a greater force and power of Hamor's control of the area. Bruce Botter in his commentary suggests that Jacob is aware of his powerlessness as a nomadic tribe in the face of the stronger tribal chieftain. And then they reiterate the power of the chieftain in that situation allows him and his son to see, to desire, and to take what they want when they want it. I mean, that's kind of the way life was. So Jacob keeps his peace, maybe hoping to gain some benefit, some compensation if he goes along to get along. But, and it happens, Hamor, in his proposals, goes farther than simply negotiating the bride price, but he suggests a general intermixing with these people. Now, they had the power just to wipe them all out and take what they wanted if Jacob had made too big a stink about it. But anyway, he says, let the two people be joined, the land is open to you. And now what seems to be a perfectly hospitable and welcoming gesture, the way it is stated, but the reality is that if they become one people, it will be the Israelites who will be absorbed by Hamor and his people, because we hear his appeal to the men of the city to undergo the circumcision. All of their flocks and all of their values and all of their possessions will become ours. They will be absorbed by us. Even though it seems open and generous and welcoming, that's really not what was about to happen. And anyway, and you remember all the years Muzan was preaching when he would talk about in the Old Testament, the tribes of Israel, they all got absorbed with the intermarrying of other peoples. They didn't keep their own identity and culture. They just got lost that way. But that raises a very common issue if we stop and think about minority immigrants coming into different countries. It raises a question of how much of your unique culture and values do you have to sacrifice in order to remain in the dominant culture. What do you have to give up in order to remain and thrive and succeed in the dominant culture? And then what do you try to hang on to maintain your own identity and so forth? Well, here with so many Hispanics coming into our country, the United States, from different places, and there in the past, and there's been, and it's still present a lot, that what you have to give up is your language. You got to speak English. You can't be speaking Spanish all the time. You have to give up your language. But what do you get to keep? Your food. I can't believe how many Mexican restaurants there are all over the place. You know, new ones start and they don't make it, and then others start and they become popular, and then you hear people talk about their favorite Mexican food place, and you know, this one, I like this one because of this and that, and this one, their salsa is better, and you know, it's thick and chunky, and others it's runny and wet, but it tastes so good. It's just the right flavor. And anyway, all of that stuff. And then the arguments between, well, is it really genuine Mexican or is it Tex-Mex? Anyway, all of those things. But that's the influence of another culture upon the dominant culture. We see that, but then what do you have to give up in order to survive and thrive is the issue that is before any immigrant group. And so that's the issue here for the Israelites at this time in this story. And that's a part of that undercurrent. Now Jacob alone, but when all the brothers get involved in the negotiations, they raise the issue of the honor and respect for their tribe. They really leave Dinah. She's not really the issue personally. She's only a symbol for this disrespect to their people and their culture and their tribe. This one act is more than a sexual attack on one girl. It's an affront to the whole nation. Now, at this point, they aren't a nation, but the wording is there, and so we need to remember the story is way back then, but when it's being written and when it's being read and out loud and spoken and told is when the Israelites are a nation. And they have this disrespect, and the ones hearing the story from the redactor and final version will understand that aspect of the story. It is an affront to the whole nation. And so we get a clue that something big is in the works when we hear the sons answer Shechem and Hamor deceitfully because they had defiled their sister Dinah. Now, they cannot allow the marriage to one who is uncircumcised. Now, at face value, that seems like a very basic issue of community identity as well as a deep cultural and religious issue that cannot be compromised. It cannot be compromised. On the one hand, it is, we will not be absorbed by you, is a way of making that statement for demanding the circumcision. We will not lose our identity. If she is so important and valuable, you will have to become one of us. You will have to become one of us. Become like us. So that's in this whole aspect and understanding of being absorbed or not absorbed, then this is one way of standing up for their own identity as a people. And this is really, we understand that that's supposed to be a part of the sign of the covenant with God, but it's also an identity of who we are as a unique people with a special culture. And a part of that is we are God's people, but we won't be absorbed. And then on the defiling issue, more than the rape, or maybe simply because of sex with the uncircumcised, that is the issue of defilement, or she's not married, but it seems to be sex with one of these others that aren't us. That's a defilement. And the only way to make it right is to undergo the circumcision. Not so much as a punishment, but more as a sense of purification. And it may also be carrying this aspect of a rite of initiation. To become, if we're going to become one, you got to come our way. And to become our way and become one of us, then this rite of initiation, of becoming one of us, is essential. And it takes another aspect. It's a trial or a test of one's loyalty and seriousness toward the union of the tribe. If it doesn't cost you anything, it doesn't mean anything to you. If it costs you something significant, then it's going to mean something important to you. So that's a dynamic of this kind of tug-of-war and negotiating that's going on here. But Von Rod points out that the unusual comment about the sons of Jacob speaking deceitfully, I mean, this is just kind of an aside, says it's rare in the stories of the patriarchs for there to be any evaluation of the words or the acts. They're just stated. You know, they did that. They didn't say, and that was a good thing or that was a bad thing. And they do make the statement when God creates that it was good, that was a good thing. But as far as the acts of the people, they're mostly just reported. The listener and the folks discussing it will put evaluation on it, but the text itself rarely puts an evaluation on the act or the words. So we see an irony here that they will be dealing deceitfully while the Shechemites or the Hivites at this point are acting honorably, trying to make right and correct the mistake or the act of the immoral act. They're honest and upfront, but Jacob's sons are deceitful and already planning revenge. And it seems like we're supposed to take note of that. We're supposed to take note of that. Now, in verse 19, we get the words, "And the young man," meaning Shechem, "did not delay to do the thing because he had delight in Jacob's daughter." Shechem immediately is circumcised in one version, as I said a while ago. The other version waits until after they go to the city gate and make the appeal to all the men, and then everybody is involved in that. But Hamor makes the argument based on economic advantage and wins them over. So the whole community agrees, and all the males are circumcised. Then Simeon and Levi, as I said, are Dinah's full brothers, who they're Leah's children, take it upon themselves to get the revenge. They sneak into the city, and they find Shechem and Hamor and kill them and kill all the rest. Now they point out, we think, well, and that doesn't make it, it's kind of confusing. They say they met the city at the gate. Well, usually gates are attached to walls, but they're saying that at this time they were not walled cities. They didn't have protection. They were open. Now, I don't know whether that's an anachronism that we hear that the elders of the city will sit at the city gate, and that's where people bring their problems and issues. That's where you find the elders, and they will confer, and they will be like small claims court for the people of the city. So gate just might not be attached to a wall. It may be gates like triumphal arches, that there's no wall connecting to them. They're just on the main road, and it's just some decorative thing that says you're here. Sort of like driving out in the country, you see some of these ranches, and they have this metal gate and the name of the ranch across it. The fence, it's barbed wire. You can step over it or through it. It's not really protecting the city, although there's a gate to get into the property. Anyway, so the irony is that the Shechemites are honorable and they're trying to make it right, and then here Jacob's sons are going to be dishonorable and sneaky and murder with revenge. Anyway, instead of the Hamor, as he was thinking that they were going to absorb the Israelites and take all of their property, here they end up getting murdered, and all of their property gets taken over by Jacob and all of his sons. So we get a reversal there, and but in that, we're not sure, in plundering the city and taking the little ones and the women, we don't know whether they just gathered them up and carried them off, or take them meant rape of them as a part of the revenge. It's one of those kind of vague statements that is not explicit. Now, it may seem like overkill to us and needless brutality and violence, but Von Rad suggests that in the times of these events of the patriarchs, and also in the times of the writing and hearing of the redactor's version, the Israelites would feel that this kind of revenge for the honor of the people is not out of place. And because it is the whole people dishonored, and that kind of revenge is not wrong. And so the rape of Dinah, as I mentioned before, becomes a symbol for the rape of the whole nation. And for the people listening to it, we've had the Babylonian captivity happen, and the people have been so badly treated by foreign powers, the whole people. And by golly, if we want to go back and kill them all, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, it's only justice. This is not an isolated case. This is a symbol of a bigger issue. So the listeners would hear it differently than we do. We just hear it as, one individual, and you're going to kill all these other innocent victims who had nothing to do with it. That doesn't seem right. But anyway, Von Rad says the origin of the story comes from the time when the tribe of Simeon and Levi were nomadic tribes. I mean, the very origin of the story. Were looking for a place to settle. But like so many of these sagas, it gets transformed into a more simple personal story that you can kind of identify with, but it has that universal messages as a part of it. And that universal or overall message that the redactor is trying to give by including this is that God is directing this history of how the children of Israel, the chosen people, struggled to survive and eventually become the nation that possesses the land of Canaan. And so he doesn't really say it, but if we understand that thread is woven through all of these stories, we can kind of understand it, and it's kind of saying it may not seem quite right, but in order to get to where we need to be, God kind of blesses this. And unfortunately, it kind of gives credence to or acceptance of the end justifies the means, which we don't believe is correct. But at these early times in writings, it was coming out of a very primitive time before highly sophisticated philosophy and logic and reasoning could see the contradictions of those kind of principles. So we have to understand this whole process is evolving and leading to greater and more clear and precise understandings of God and God's justice. Remember, we haven't gotten to the prophets yet, who will condemn the acts of the people, saying that the Lord God made me God's mouthpiece, and God is not happy with you. Your ways are not my ways, thus says the Lord. So we haven't gotten there yet. So we need to not be too critical or judgmental or take this as an example of, well, it's in the Bible, then if it's in the Bible, then it must be okay. And as we dealt with slavery, that some people tried to use that argument to justify slavery. But anyway, then we get to Dana Fuel and her commentary as a feminist, and she has some very enlightening commentary here. With her analysis, she calls our attention to the fact that the stories and the writing of these biblical accounts are very strongly from a male-dominated culture in the beginning. You know, just the description of what's going on. It's male-dominated, and it's very insensitive and uninterested in the woman's experience or perspective. And we see that illustrated by saying, Dinah's birth as the last child of the unloved Leah gets eclipsed by the arrival of Rachel's firstborn son Joseph. And in the story of all the births, all the male children, they come with these great joys and hope and accompanied by prayers being answered and all of this. But for Dinah, the birth comes without any additional word. Just a girl named Dinah is born to Leah. Period. But the name Dinah, which isn't developed by the other male biblical scholars, the name Dinah means judgment. But then there's no explanation of why she's given that name, or who's being judged, or why, or what the judgment is. You know, a judgment can be guilty as charged, or innocent, free to go. So judgment, who's being judged, and what is the judgment, and upon who, for what, or how, or when. It leaves it open for discussion. Now, Dinah is born into a world and a culture where daughters matter little, and as I've said before, not named in some of the lists of the children of Jacob. So, with so little recognition and regard within her own family, and no sisters for companions, it's not surprising that her interest and willingness to risk safety to venture out to visit the women of the town, that's not surprising. Now, Dana Fuel points out that the narrator immediately moves to mute the outrage one might feel about Dinah's being raped. For after he says that Shechem sees her, takes her, rapes her, next sentence says that Shechem's soul clung to Dinah, daughter of Jacob, and he loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. Or as Dana Fuel translates the verse, he spoke to the young woman's heart. Spoke tenderly to her, spoke to her heart. Now, Fuel points out that Shechem, in the verse where it says he saw her, he took her, he lay with her, and he raped her, or humbled her, in those expressions, Dinah is an object. She has no name. She has no family. She's just a female that he takes and he abuses or violates. She's not a person with a name and a family. But the very next verse treats Dinah as a person with a name, with a family. His soul, his deepest feelings cling to her. And he loved her, and he spoke to her heart. I mean, what a radical change in one verse. Just kaboom. And Fuel's saying that the author is trying to mute the outrage by doing that. But, seeing how she can't go back centuries to talk to the author to know, is that what you were thinking? We don't know. But anyway, speaking to the woman's heart, she points out, is shifting from Shechem's objectifying a woman to Dinah's feeling in the heart. In her translation, speaking to her heart, the heart, we know, is the poetic way of talking about feelings, deep emotions, and most specifically, the emotion of love. So if he speaks tenderly to her heart, we're getting to that aspect of he loves her, away from seeing her as an object that he violates to a person that he loves and wants a relationship with. So, but Dana is saying, assuming that if indeed Dinah was raped, that it's hardly believable that she could immediately be responsive to this change. He just brutally violated her, and how does one get over that in a second? She points out that, this trauma would have been very severe, and also points out that rape, if it's rape, it is not motivated by love or sexual attraction. It's misogyny, it's a control issue, it's an act of violence meant to hurt, demean, subjugate, control the woman. As a woman, it's not that person, it is an objectification also, and it has no tenderness or love in it. It's often rage or anger against females directed against one female that's just in the wrong place at the wrong time. So Dana points out those issues, but she also suggests that we may be reading an example of male fantasy, and she quotes, "Men want to believe that women really, quote, want it, that women love to be abused by men." And she makes this comment after asking, why does Dinah return with Shechem to his home? And why does she listen to him and allow him to touch her heart? Why does this happen? Well, the account never allows Dinah to have a voice for her own feelings or thoughts about any of this. She did she have freedom to choose to go with Shechem to his house, or was she carried off, coerced? Her voice, her inner feelings, her desires are not given voice in the story, and her fate is determined by men. Hamor and Shechem negotiate